We live in astounding times. Our access in the photo and video marketplace to cameras that open doors and inspire, it's as good as it's ever been. Development has continued at a steady rate, but prices have gone down in various different areas, allowing us to get gear that really blows our socks off. But the main players in the game, like Canon, like Nikon, both of which who released cameras this week in the ZR and the C50 that are incredible pieces of technology, they both share one thing in common, and that's that there's a piece of information they don't want you to have figured out, because if you have this figured out, you're far less likely to continue buying into their developments, to continue buying so many of their cameras. It's always going to be their interest for you to buy more. So what is it that they don't want you to know? Well, in this video, I want to explain what it is that you should figure out that they don't want you to have figured out. I'm going to go into some of the considerations you can go through in order to be a more well-rounded consumer of both technology and a more well-rounded producer of art. And finally, I'll explain what it is that I'm doing to better invest in my potential portfolio and the photos and the breadth of photos that I'd like to produce. So stick around for that at the end of the video. So what is it that these camera companies all want you to not figure out? What's the piece of information that they'd like you to never quite get to? Well, it's ultimately your driver. The less sure you are of what you want to shoot, of where you want to take your creativity, of where you want to focus your energy, the more likely you are to invest, to buy things to fill that void, to bridge the gap between where you are and where you'd like to be. It's easy to look at materialism as an answer to the problem of this empty space, of this lack in your portfolio. The people in the pro space, largely people working in photography or videography full-time, they tend to have an answer of exactly what it is they need. And they're much less likely to upgrade as often. They just don't tend to, because quite frankly, most technology is advancing faster than it actually needs to for the use cases of the pro user. I know that seems a little bit like a contradiction, right? Like the pro photographer and the pro videographer would want the best tech. And sure, many of them do, but they recognize that it's not actually necessary most of the time to reach their goals. So the question you can ask yourself then is, well, what is my driver? Because that driver, especially for a prosumer or a consumer who may not be working in that pro space, that driver is still a big barrier between new gear and a better portfolio in the eyes of these companies. Consider someone who is in love with the analog space, right? Someone who's very used to the manual experience, maybe uses film cameras and loves them. Well, that's a driver for their purchasing decisions. That's someone who's ultimately going to be focused on something like the Fujifilm X-T5, something like the Leica M11, the Nikon ZR. That's going to refine the focus of their gear acquisition, and ultimately they can cloud out most of the other items entering the marketplace because it doesn't really suit them. That narrows the market. It loses these big companies opportunities, but ultimately people that know that driver, that have clarity on that front, they're buying more precisely and more intentionally. My point is, the more clarity you have as an individual on what drives you, what propels you in your creativity, the less likely you are to fall culprit to the cycle of improvement, of the next camera available, of the materialism that ultimately has a strong grip on the photo video creativity industry. Just as a quick aside, because I think it's important to say, I desperately want the Nikon ZR. I don't desperately need it, but man, I want it so bad. I think it looks like an incredible new offering, and I do know that I could use it in my workflows. So the way I'm gonna go about potentially acquiring it, or going through the considerations, the mental thought process I need before spending that kind of money, I'm gonna make a list of what ultimately I need in order to take the photos and create the content that I want to create. The Nikon ZR does fall somewhere on that list, but I'm gonna make sure I check the items off before I get to it. I hope that makes some sense. Hey team, if you've made it this far, thank you for watching. I can't tell you how much that matters to me. I'd love to know down below the answer to one question. What is the best investment you've ever made in your creativity? It can be a new camera, it can be a new lens, it can also be a ticket to Zimbabwe, it can be whatever. Just let me know down below. Now, second, if you could just take 10 seconds to like, subscribe, and I don't know, hit the bell so you know when my videos come out, that makes an absolutely massive difference. I have one really strong belief when it comes to creativity and to creating a portfolio that compels maybe just you, maybe your family as a coffee book table at mom's house, maybe the whole world through a book living in a library 100 years from now. What I believe is most important, where I believe you should invest the most, and where I hope I'm investing the most and intend to invest the most in the future, is into access. Now, access is like a bridge between you and your photographs. And it seems really simple, right? Access might mean a plane ticket to New York to do street photography in the Mecca. That can be access. But access might also look like a mountaineering course or a set of courses to learn how to manage your ropes, to learn how to mitigate crevasse risks, to avoid avalanche circumstances. Those kinds of investments into those skills create the access, the ability to make it to places, to positions, to photographic opportunities that are unique, that not many people are able to reach, and where very refined, very specific stories are occurring. And if that's where your portfolio compels you, then the investment into the access to that space is dramatically more important than the investment into any laptop, into any camera, into any new lens. That access is above all else the most important thing you can invest in. Now, I do recognize that we all need the gear to capitalize on these opportunities, right? I do think that's important. And setting up a plan to acquire the camera that meets your needs, it's worth doing, right? Ending up with that lens that you can take anywhere, whether it's the 16-35 or the 24-70, whatever it might be, a 20-200 like we're seeing out of Sigma right now. These kinds of lenses are great. And it might mean that investing in the Nikon ZR or the Canon C50 is the best thing you can do, because those cameras might be exactly what you need to capitalize on the narratives in those places that you're accessing. But make sure that you're considering your budget and you're taking a portion, probably a disproportionately large portion, and funneling that towards access, funneling that towards the skills you need to be in the places you want to be. Now, I guess that brings me to the final point here. What have I chosen to invest in rather than the Nikon ZR that I deeply want? In fact, I just sold my favorite camera, the Fujifilm X-T5, so that I could invest in this thing that ultimately I believe is going to take my portfolio where I've always dreamt of taking it. I sold the Fujifilm X-T5 and I invested that money into an underwater housing and dive lessons. I've always looked up to photographers like Ben Thoward or Morgan Masson, some of these really incredible underwater and wave-oriented photographers who are capturing stories in a place that just inspires creativity. So I want to do that. And no camera is going to make me better at taking photos in that environment. I have the gear I need, other than I need the access. In this case, there is an item, that underwater housing, that is necessary, so there's a bit of materialism involved, and that's a barrier to access here that's important. But without the dive lessons, without the practice using the housing, without the investment into breath hold, I can't take the photos there. So the majority of my money will go into being a better individual in and under the water. So that's where I'm investing. Now, I'd love for you guys to let me know where you would want to invest. What is the access you're looking for? Where do you want to take your photos? Is it under the water? Is it into the sky? Where in the world? That's kind of like, the most exciting thing in photography is the stories that drive us, the places it takes us. So feel free to share your stories, share your aspirations in the comments below, and we can all thrive off of that, and we can all get inspired. All right, I will talk to you guys soon, and you know what? If you want a new camera, get a new camera. It doesn't matter to me, but these are my thoughts, so there you go. Talk to you later.